Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jensen with CCJ 3701, Research Methods in Criminology. So I wanted to take some time to go through a typical outline of a research paper. So we're going to start getting your topic ready, start looking at some sources to inform your reader about your topic, and then we're going to find data to match your topic so you can run some statistics on it, present those statistics in tables, and run tests and get a result or an answer to your research question. So I'll have this outline posted on Canvas for you so you can kind of look at it and use it to start building in the pieces of your paper. But I wanted just to go through it for now so you can kind of get familiar with what you're going to be creating toward the end of the semester. So here we go. I'll also show you an example paper. This is what I call a quantitative research paper outline, quantitative referring to us running statistics and crunching data. So it has a section called an intro section, and I tell people begin with a hook, get me interested in your topic. You can use an intriguing scenario or some social facts or stats about it, or an interesting question about your topic, or why we should be into it. And then you also want to present an introduction to your research question. What will your study examine? So the first few paragraphs kind of get us going and also familiarize us with what you're about to be looking at in detail. Then the following paragraphs do what we call a literature review. Literature meaning reviewing the scientific literature on the subject. So right here you can see in the outline, describe the current state of knowledge in the area. What has been done, what hasn't been done? What do we know about it? Critique what is missing. So you're making a case for the contribution you'll make with your study. You'll prepare the reader for your study based on what we currently know. Help me, the reader, understand your focal relationship. A focal relationship is your independent-dependent variable, basically your topics and your questions. So that's the relationship of focus, the one that we're going to be testing with statistics later in the paper. So what's the relationship you're trying to test? You want to describe that to me. You'll also briefly describe other factors that also relate to your topic, things like control variables or other things that we think influence what happens. Okay, so it's just a kind of a way to get started, provide some background to the reader so they're familiar with the things they need to be aware of to understand your test and what you're going to do and better appreciate the result. Then we have a brief theory section. This is where you discuss what we call your theoretical paradigm, which is, this is how I think about this topic. This is how I explain it and what I think is going on when this happens. This is what happens and this is why. So this is where you put things like conceptualization and any propositions you have of how you think it works. Your definitions of when I say drug use, I mean this. When I see underage drinking, I mean that. We'll also have a little diagram that I'll show you in a few minutes, and kind of a figure or a model chart that has circles and arrows that kind of starts to point directions to relationships. We actually get to build one of those in the lab. It's really fun because we get to do shapes and arrows and crazy stuff like that. After that, we have a data and methods section. So you're going to use a data set just like the ones you've been working on in labs. Ad Health or a general social survey or maybe the children's health data set. You can use any data set you want, and I'll help you find suitable data for your topic that will have good measurement or operationalization. So you're going to describe the data to me, the name of it, the source where they got the information from, the year it came from, what is the research design of the data set, how did they begin their study or collect their data, was it interviews, was it surveys, was it telephone collection, how did they do this? Then we'll look at what is the sampling frame, how did they draw the sample, did they use a stratified sample or a cluster or probability, just like we talked about in earlier lectures. So you're going to describe all the methods that they took to get the data so we know what we're working with here. So again, this is kind of all preparing the reader to understand how you're going to know what you know at the end of the study. Then right after the methods section, you operationalize or identify your variables in a little subsection. So you tell me, this is my independent variable, this is my dependent, this is my control variable. These are how they're measured. These are the answer choices that were given in the survey question, and these are the responses to those. How did I make any changes? Did I recode anything? Did I shove stuff together, pull stuff apart? Maybe I built a scale. So we'll be learning how to do all that kind of stuff. But this is where you tell someone what you did. So that way, again, they better understand the result. Then we have some hypotheses. We want to know what your prediction is going to be. This is what I think is going to happen. So you kind of do this before you actually just start testing. So you do estimated results. What do you predict will happen? Will something increase or decrease? Will something become more or less likely? What will the relationship be between your variables? How does knowing one variable predict the outcome on another? So this is where we get to kind of make some fun predictions as to what you think is going to happen. And then we want to also note, how is the data going to be compared or analyzed? What statistical tools will be used? Little spoiler alert, you're going to be using regression. Okay, so we're going to actually regress your variables. We'll find out in a few weeks what that is. Okay, and then you have results. You take your variables that illustrate your topic, you run your statistics, and you present to us what you found out. So how did everything perform? What was statistically significant? What were the statistical numbers you got? What did they mean in plain English? Was it a strong relationship, a weak one? How did it work? What was the nature of it? And then you present some tables of information. This has things like models inside it. I'm not going to go into detail quite yet about that. I'll show you an example soon. But then later, after you show us tables of all the stuff that SPSS spit out, you describe what it means in a few paragraphs, then you wrap up the end. And you're going to have plenty of time to do this as the last remaining weeks of the semester. You discuss. So now that I ran all my statistics, I did all my testing, I coded my variables, and I ran everything, what did I find out? Versus what did I think I was going to find? So this is when you go back to your hypotheses or your predictions. Was I right? It's totally okay to be wrong. I can't tell you how many times I've been wrong when I've done research, and I stand corrected, right? We thought it happened this way. Well, actually, it turns out that doesn't matter. Or actually, it works this way. Welcome to science. That's why we test things, because we're not sure. So it's okay to be wrong. Don't think you're going to fail the class because your prediction was wrong. That's just part of the scientific method. So we write about predicted and unpredicted areas of significance, implications on the findings. So based on now what you know, what should we do with it? How should we use this information to improve the world around us? Maybe you busted a myth, a common notion you dispelled. Everyone thinks it works like this. Turns out it actually doesn't. Do you have any policy implications on how we should change the way we do things now that you know what you know? What can you do with what you learned? How does it inform our decisions, our society, or our social life? At the very end, your very last section is a conclusion section. So you briefly summarize your entire study from beginning to end. You emphasize how your study advances the research, and you describe how, what was your contribution? What did you find out? What were the strengths of your study, the weaknesses? And I tell people, be brief and don't oversell it. You don't want to convince the reader so much how your study sucked so bad that they go, well, that was a waste of time. I shouldn't have read it. It's just a matter of disclosures. If in an ideal world, maybe my variables weren't perfect. I really wish they were worded like this. Or I had to kind of settle on the data. I wish I had more recent data. So this is where you get to kind of talk about what went right, what went wrong. And then what's the major point I should be taking away? If I could only remember one thing about your paper, what would it be? What would you want me to walk away from? And then finally, we wrap up with possibilities for future study. What's next? And that's it. So these are all little paragraphs that all get sewn together into this formal research paper. So it starts looking like a journal article, actually. And this turns into a heck of a writing sample to give to an employer, graduate study, law school, you name it, to say, look, I did this. I know how to do all this stuff. This is great. And this is a common format for a research report that you could provide an organization. And of course, at the end, you have references of articles you used in your paper that will underscore what you're working on, what you're going to find, or emphasize the importance of your study. So this is the outline. Again, just kind of a list of the pieces as they fit together. But let's look at a sample paper right here. So I kind of did a very shrunken down view so you can get kind of a high-level view of how many pages we're talking about. Yours is not going to be nearly this long. This is a much longer paper than I would expect you to turn in. And I tell people, don't worry about length. Worry about, make sure, each section is strong. Most of these sections are like a paragraph or two. They're very easy to do. We'll be writing pieces of the paper as we go So you'll get to turn in sections ahead of time and build it and get comments and feedback, make changes until we get close to the end, and then you put it all together, make any edits you want, and then we turn in the whole thing. So don't get overwhelmed looking at this, because we're going to see little sections in advance. So here you can see we have a cover page. We actually have a little abstract right here. So we'll teach you how to write an abstract really soon. Then we have a few paragraphs of introduction. Again, this is lots of pages. I don't think you're going to be quite this long, maybe a page, page and a half of literature review. And then right here, we have theory, a discussion of your explanation, what you think is going to happen. And then further on, we get data and methods. So this is where the person describes the data set and some of the variables and stuff like that. Then you see this crazy little creature right there in the middle of the paper. This creature is what we call a figure. So this starts to diagram some of the variables you have that you're going to test and what's inside them and how you think they work. We're actually going to make these together. They're kind of fun. And then, again, we describe any changes we made to the variables, things like recoding or shoving stuff into a scale or a summation. Depends on how you want to measure stuff with, what you want to do to the data. Then you can see we have some tables. You're actually going to build these tables, okay? So these tables are basically descriptive statistics. We call them univariate statistics. Frequencies, means, medians, and modes. They describe the data. They show us the variables that you have to work with right now before you test them. Okay, so a few tables. Then later on you get this crazy little monster we call the regression table. And this is the kind of stuff that you used to skip in journal articles because you didn't know what it meant, and I did too, because I went, well, I don't know what any of that stuff is. You're going to get so good at reading tables in this class. It will be awesome. You'll never be afraid of them again. So usually the tables were the last place I wanted to go in a journal article when I was trying to read research. And I would just go right to the conclusion, or I'd read the abstract and go, oh, okay. Now the tables are the first place I go in a journal article because I know how to read them. So we'll make sure that you feel comfortable doing that and comfortable putting your statistics into a table that you can actually use to illustrate your findings. Then again, just a few paragraphs of, results, what you found out. And then right here, here's the discussion. This is what we should do with this information, wrapping up into a conclusion, which is right here. Again, these are just a few paragraphs each. Not a big deal at all. You'll be concerned with just getting all the parts out rather than trying to fit a length. So don't worry about page length, really. In fact, some people's topics might be a little longer and some might be a little shorter, and that's not a big deal. It kind of just depends on how complicated your topic is. So then after the conclusion, we have some pages of references, and you're done. That's it. That's basically a whole paper right there. So again, don't freak out too much with what you see. It looks a little daunting, but the fun part is I have table templates that are already built and ready to go out of the box that you can go drop your data into, and then you just format it. I also have templates for your figure. I have plenty of sample papers to look at. We're going to practice writing up research, looking at samples of all these little pieces so you can get a sense of how to word things and how to fit stuff together. And again, we'll see these sections in advance so we can fix them as we go. But yep, that's what you're going to create in the end of class. So we'll be getting busy on this pretty soon, and you'll be using every single skill you've practiced in the labs on your own data and your own variables. So that's why we're teaching you how to do all this recoding stuff and running statistics stuff, because you're going to be doing this on your topic in a data set of your choice, and we'll be choosing those in the next week or so, really shortly here. But I wanted to give you a preview of what's coming next, so that way if you want to start preparing or brainstorming, you can do that. So hopefully you found this helpful, and again, I'll be sending you more little pieces to help get you started. But again, don't think too much about it. You'll be fine, and we'll get you started shortly here. But this is how you know what's coming. And we will see you again soon.